Hello, Tileyard students. I'm John Torrens, and I'm going to be talking to you for about 45 minutes on pitching skills, presentation skills, communication skills, that kind of thing. I'm going to talk about how to write great material, how to use visuals, how to engage an audience with your performance, and finally, how to feel confident when speaking in front of people. And let's face it, nobody enjoys standing up and speaking in front of people, and anyone who says that they do is a liar or deluded. Quick intro to me. I have been self-employed as a communication coach for about 10 years now. Prior to that, I worked in video games as a level designer. Before that, I was a stand-up comic professionally for a couple of years. And before that, I was also a video games designer and part-time stand-up comic for about 10 years. So what I've done is I've brought the lessons I've learned from stand-up in terms of writing and delivery, and I've brought them to business, and that's worked very well because people are interested in knowing how to do that effectively. Other things I like, well, you can see what I like because it's all behind me. So let's get into it. Let's start off. First step, you have been told or you've realized that you've got to give a talk. You've got to stand up in front of people. And that's a terrifying prospect, right? And first things first, don't ever think that you're more nervous than everyone else, or that other people don't get nervous, or everyone does. And it doesn't indicate anything other than you're a normal human being, okay? It's completely logical. You're going to stand up in front of some people. You can't predict the outcome, and you care about the outcome, therefore you're nervous. So that's the very first thing. The nerves are normal, they're part of the process. Okay, so to get past them, you need to take some action. Okay, you need to start creating some stuff. So very first thing then, assuming that you're an expert on your subject, I hope you're not ever asked to speak about something you don't know about. Assuming you're an expert on your subject, the first thing I want you to do is to do some research. Now, you could do a little bit of research into the subject itself in terms of something current. So check out the news, just see what the very latest thinking is on your subject. That could be really useful. But a more important one, I think, is to research, well, see if you can work it out. What's the best thing you could research if you're going to be speaking to some people? That's right, it's your audience. So you are going to speak to them, and the objective, that's kind of the key, is to persuade them of something. Right? So for your pitch, you want to persuade them that your idea, your offering is wonderful and they should invest time and money in it. Okay, that's good. So I think the best way to do that is to find out as much as you can about them. What do they know, first of all? Have you got to explain things to them? What do they want? What are the pain points for them? What are they after? What motivates them? So if you look on LinkedIn, if you have their specific names, which is obviously very useful, if you've got the names, look them up and find out, people put LinkedIn profiles going back decades, right? Find out, what have they done before? What's the consistent theme throughout everything that they've done? What motivates them? It may be they're all about the money, right? They just love making money. Great. So you're going to pitch something to them that's going to make lots of money. Wonderful. Or perhaps they're all about the art. Or maybe they say they're about the art, but actually they're about the money. Whatever it is, find out what it is that makes them tick. What motivates them? Why are they there? Why are they listening to you? Find out what that is and incorporate that into your talk and consider the objective of the whole thing. It's not just, here's my wonderful offering, here's my thing. It's, you need this, I've got this thing, why don't you invest in it? So problem and solution. Find out everything you can about them. Right, look on their social media, see what makes them tick. I think that's a great start. Right, following that, you've got an idea of the goal of the whole thing, who you're talking to and what you need to achieve. You need to start creating some material. So brace yourself, because I've got a fantastic method, which I think I've invented. Yeah. This method is to get you to a first draft as quickly as possible, right? Now, I've certainly been guilty of spending way too long creating beautiful slides and things like that, but I really like a quick, rough way of getting to a first draft because it puts your your nerves puts your sort of mind at rest, eases your nerves, soothes your nerves, but it also gets you to that point where you realize, actually, I could do this I could do this straight away without any further preparation. Anyway, here it is. So you write down the headings for your talk. So you might have 3, 4, 5 sections of your talk, of your pitch, and you write them down on separate pieces of paper. Okay, so cue cards, post-it notes, scraps of paper, doesn't matter what they are. Now, the principle here is that it's fluid. So you're going to experiment with the structure, and by having them on different bits of paper, you can really be ruthless with it. So you can decide to chuck things away. You might realize, well, actually, I'm kind of repeating myself here. I'm going to consolidate these things. Or my killer, amazing story, or my thing, my big thing. So maybe it's a demo, right? Maybe you've got some fantastic thing to show them, and you think, oh, I'll save that to the end. That's the finale. Why not bring that to the beginning? Maybe that's a great way to catch their attention. Who knows? But the point is, you're experimenting with the structure, and you mess around with it. And as soon as you've got something that feels like it could work, that it's got a decent flow, maybe it is that problem solution sequence, then you go to step 2, which is to say the words out loud. So that first part of writing it out, I call it sketch method. The second part, which kind of overlaps, I call speak to write. And the idea is that you're saying the words out loud. So let's say you've got 5 sections and you run through it. And at this very high level, it only takes, say, a couple of minutes. The benefits of saying the words out loud are many and significant. Can you say many as an adjective like that? I think I can. So, first of all, I mean, a really simple thing is you get an idea of words that might trip you up. Now, these might not be tricky words, but sometimes very innocuous words can trip you up when they're in a particular sequence. No one knows why, right? But there might be a word that trips you up, a word that you should get rid of, so you can get rid of it. So that's a nice little thing. So it just eases you through, because generally, I think, from my experience, people create a talk, they will go straight to PowerPoint, which I think is a mistake. They'll make some slides, they'll spend lots of time on it, but they won't say the words out loud. So what happens on the day when they give their pitch? It's a mess, because they haven't practiced doing the thing that they're going to be doing, and you should practice the thing you're going to be doing. So by saying the words out loud, you've actually started the vocal exercise of delivering this thing, which is really good. So you get an idea of words that might get in the way, so you can fix those. You get an idea of the flow. You get an idea of links between the different sections, rather than finish a section and then say, next section. You've got a little segue. You've got something a little bit conversational in there. It's a fantastic way of informing the writing process. Because as you're talking, ideas will come. There's something about saying the words out loud that loosens up the thinking process, in the same way that if you're trying to solve a problem, I find, if I start handwriting and drawing and sketching stuff, suddenly it just liberates some part of my brain and frees it up. I don't know how. So saying the words out loud will give you this wonderful shortcut to the level that a talk can get to when it's been rehearsed a lot. It also crucially gives you an idea of how long the thing's going to take. And for me, overrunning is a huge crime, right? So when you say to someone, I'm going to talk to you for 10 minutes, and then you get to 15, it's annoying. And particularly if there's a series of speakers. So you run through it, and as you're going through it, you realize, okay, this works here, this is good, this flows, and you can get to a nice first draft that might not be fully populated. You might only have a short amount of material, small amount of material in each section, but you've got something that works. You can keep iterating that, going through it, running through it, and get it to a point where the structure is solid. And the reason I'm so pleased with this approach is that it saves you the wasted time that can happen when later down the line, when you've made all your slides and it looks amazing, if you haven't done this process, you realize, oh, actually, this structure is broken. Like, actually, this thing should come here. And then you're trying to move these huge bits of material, and you've got an emotional connection to it because you've spent ages on it. With this process, you get to that quick first draft in maybe half an hour or so, and you've got something that flows, it works, and the output from that should be cues. Okay, so I'm against a verbatim full script. I know a lot of people like to write out a full script, and it means you get the words exactly right, But as you've probably worked out, when you read a script, it just takes the edge off your delivery. It feels recited, and it doesn't work as well. For me, something that's spoken from cues or using cues as a basis, and the cue could be one word for 30 seconds or a minute of speaking, or a word or a short phrase. That method, it feels so much more conversational and natural. So the possible downside with that is you finish the talk and you realize, oh, I didn't mention this key bit of information. That for me is far outweighed by the fact that it's natural and just conversational and relaxed. So the output are the cues, and the cues could be it could be a series of index cards, cue cards, but it could be one sheet of A4 paper with the headings and massive typeface, and so you can see at any point, well, this is what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to go into it, and you might have some little sub bullets underneath each section heading, but you're going to talk around it, okay? And that, I think, lets you off the hook in terms of delivering a perfect script, which is a terrible idea, because if any part of it goes wrong, you feel like the whole thing's derailed. It also means you can expand and contract. If they say, oh, well, actually, you've only got 5 minutes instead of 10, you can tighten it up a bit. You can skip a section. Now, the next bit with this, and I guess for a 10-minute talk, maybe it doesn't matter as much, but I'd still suggest you do it, is to get your, where's my phone gone? You get your phone, you know what a mobile phone looks like, but I like to use the stopwatch function on my phone, and what I will do is go through it. So with mine, I guess it's fairly, it's not sort of huge on the screen, but it's enough that you could have it next to you. Anyway, what you do is once you've got it to a fairly consistent duration, time the thing and write down the start time of each section. So for a 10-minute pitch or 50-minute pitch, maybe you only need to note down the start time of 2 or 3 points, right? Maybe even the halfway point, or the very final one. If you run through it and rehearse it a few times, I would always recommend at least 3 times. Okay, but if you can do more, that's better. Reword it each time so it doesn't start coming out exactly the same each time. Keep it nice and fresh for you. But note those start times, and then, as you've probably worked out, you can use the stopwatch function on your phone next to your notes during the talk, which I think you can get away with, and you can see, right, I'm at 5 minutes, section 2 starts at 6 minutes, good, I'm in place, I'm in the right place. What tends to happen, of course, is that you overrun. So you get to, you look at the time and it says 6 minutes, you realize you should have started section 2 minutes ago and you need to pick up the pace. But it means you can make those adjustments. Crucially, what this does is it helps tackle the issue of your perception of how fast time is elapsing. So that can just go out the window. And I still have that. Time can dilate massively or contract. I can't work out any consistent rule to it, but basically you can be speaking and your idea of how long it's taken you to speak is just gone out the window, right? And particularly when I've done stuff, I've done at Tileyard where I've got people to speak. They've spoken for about 8 minutes and I say, how long? And they say 3, 4. They've wildly underestimated it. So it lets you bring the thing on time. And for a much longer talk, let's say you were doing a 45-minute piece, then it means you can deliver it within 30 seconds or a minute of the start time, which is always good. So that should be your output. That's how you create that first draft. Now, itchy nose, sorry. I think it's hay fever, I can't tell. Next thing then is slides. Now, you'll notice I've said, hey, here's how you create this first draft before you even start with PowerPoint. And as I mentioned, I love PowerPoint. But I think if you do it this way round, where you create the talk, you do yourself a massive favor. And the 2 aspects I want you to consider are, firstly, perhaps you could give your talk without slides. Now, I know that's radical, amazing. And generally, I think it is good to have some kind of slide up there, some kind of visual, because people like it. And generally, to cover the different, ways that people take in the information, I certainly do like a visual. However, if you can get the idea into people's heads, and that's all you're doing with a pitch or presentation, right? You just want to get an idea into people's heads. If you can do it through spoken language alone, why have slides? Why create something that can be a big distraction and certainly has a huge amount of potential for sabotaging what you're doing and affecting the effectiveness, distracting the audience and just getting in the way. If you've got something that really works and people get it through just speaking to them, brilliant, right? It's arguably more effective. You've given yourself less work, less risk. But also, and here's the thing, let's say a series of people get up to pitch and they each have their slide deck and they do fairly well, and I mean, technically nothing really gets in the way and the slides are good and it works. But then you get up and you say, I'm going to talk to you about this. And suddenly they realize it's not the slides, it's you. You're the medium for this talk. That, I think, has a greater impact. Now, of course, you could do a little mixture of that and do that first opening with no slides and then bring up some slides. But I just want you to consider that. Only introduce them as you need them. Only introduce slides and visuals to solve a problem. Okay? You may only need them for part of your talk. You might not need them at all. So I just want to give that to you. In terms of visuals, let's talk a bit about that because I happen to love that. You'll see I'm not using slides here because I think it gets in the way. Start off with images. Start off with as little text as possible. Right? Now, you might think, well, that's all very well, but I need to send this deck to my audience, or I need to send it afterwards. That doesn't mean you need a ton of text. And in fact, I would say the less text, the better. Put lots of, sometimes the first draft will have a lot of text. I would put all your text into the notes, right? You can always send them the slides afterwards with all the notes and information, all that text in there in the notes. And it works if you save it as a PDF as well. They still have all the information there. So you might have a slide deck that's 5 beautiful images and no text. And they'll think, yeah, not that useful if you send it to me. But if you've got all your stuff in there, then that's really good. Don't rely on the slides as a cue for you. I personally don't like that. I think if you're relying on the dual monitor setup where on the screen you have your current slide and then the next slide and your notes and things, often that doesn't work. Often the setup is mirroring, so you don't have them at all. I would print out all of the cues. You either do that, you can do the A4 sheet like I've suggested. You can print out from PowerPoint, which is really good, and that can be quite handy. Having backup plans is really, really useful. So make the slides serve you, okay, not the other way around. Don't think, oh, I haven't got my slides, I can't give a presentation. You can absolutely give your pitch or presentation. The slides are just there to back you up, okay? Okay, so another thought on visuals. You might be thinking, well, actually, I've got a load of data that I want to show, okay? So, there's lots of stuff there. That might be a fantastic problem that a slide can solve, which is here's a graph with a ton of information, or here's lots of data. You show that to your audience and it beams it into their head straight away, much more effectively than if you would try to describe all that information. Okay, so that's good. But I would spoon feed it to them. Okay, if you've got bullets, if you've got a graph, if you've got any large amount of data, do a fade reveal, right, which is a really simple animation, so that when the slide starts, there's nothing on it, maybe a title, and you give them one thing at a time. If you've got a list, they'll be looking at the last one on the list when you're talking about the first, and so on. If you've got a huge graph, they'll have worked out your conclusion before you show it to them. So give it to them piece by piece. But as I say, I mentioned images, obviously not just any image, an image of you, an image of your audience, your team, real people. It's interesting, it's engaging. I imagine you wouldn't be using stock photos, but I would stay away from those if you can. Right, so what we talked about how to create the material, how to do visuals. Another thing then I'm going to mention in that section, I'm going to get onto delivery in a bit, would be stories. So stories are amazing for breathing life into ordinary information. And each of you does have a unique and therefore interesting story, right? A very British thing that I see is when people stand up and say, oh, sorry, this isn't going to be very interesting, or I'm never going to follow that because someone's just told a great story. They then proceed to tell a very interesting story. Everyone's unique, okay? Don't think that your story isn't interesting. It is, because we're all different. And I know that seems incredibly obvious, but your story has a unique angle and experience. And basically, stories are the way that we have communicated for thousands of years, as long as we've had any kind of language. They fundamentally create interest. Brené Brown, in her great talk, The Power of Vulnerability, it's a TED talk, said stories are data with a soul, right? You can lay out some really well-structured information, but if you start with, I was in this place a year ago, that could be a geographical or a mental state, and this is what was happening. I had this problem, and as a result, this was happening. I did this, I took this step. And you don't have to have suffering in your story, but generally it makes it more interesting. Suddenly you've got interest, you've got relevance. And so I would always incorporate a story if you can. And now, you don't have to make the whole thing a story and try and make it this very neat arc. You can tell little stories. So stand-up comics will tell 20, 30-second stories, okay? But consider your experience and how you can bring that into it. It's just way more engaging. Right, anything else on stories? I think that's it. Yeah, so just consider your story and the different stories that you have and that you can use in your pitch. Right, so where are we at? 21 minutes, 45, good for me. Delivery, engagement. So you have your material. You've got your stuff, you've run through it, you've rehearsed it. Rehearsal is your friend. You're fairly comfortable with the duration. You've got an idea of some killer visuals if you're using them. How do you engage your audience? For me, the very first thing is that first impression, right? The pitch starts as soon as they're looking at you, okay? So your name might be announced and you think, right, well, I haven't started yet, and you walk up and you get ready. It's started. They're already looking at you. So for me, that first impression has to be a really positive one, because I think if you get that right, you probably tip the scales in your favor. I think you give yourself a far greater chance of success before you've even really started. So what do you do in that first moment? Eye contact, smile. Hello, this is me. I'm going to talk to you about this, right? Just straight into it. Something conversation, it doesn't matter. But engage them, look at them. I think if you do that, there's a couple of clever little tricks that happen. So the first is you tell the audience that you're comfortable, right? Now, you may and probably will be quite nervous, okay? That's fine, but this is a trick, and it's a very virtuous trick. By looking happy, by looking reasonably comfortable, the audience broadly, I think, infers, okay, yeah, this is going to be good. You seem to know what you're doing. You probably know what you're talking about. You've probably done this before. This is huge, right? Because the bar for speaking in this country, I'm going to say, is pretty low, right? People give presentations that aren't very good. They're boring. They haven't prepared enough. And I'm sitting in the audience going, wasted potential. If, however, you've really put in the work and you walk up there and you deliver something that really engages them, then you're, giving yourself a fantastic chance of success. So in that first moment, they think, yeah, okay, this is going to be good, right? They've no idea. They've just made this snap judgment, right? And then, of course, you deliver something wonderful, and we all look for evidence to back up our first impression. They see something wonderful. Great, you're in a good place. Little smile at the beginning, maybe just acknowledging the situation. I wouldn't necessarily say, hey, I feel nervous, but you could say, oh, there's a lot of you, or I haven't done this before. But as long as you're smiling, I think that's fine. Straight into it, right? Lovely. If, however, you haven't prepared correctly, and we'll talk a little bit about the venue and the physicality of the whole thing. If there's that little stumble, and I've seen it so many times, people come up and they haven't really checked out the tech, and so there's a little thing, and they're not smiling because they think, well, I need to be professional, I need to impress the audience, therefore I've got to be serious and use eloquent language. They leave behind all the interesting humanity that they should have brought. And if there's a little stumble at the beginning and they're not quite sure where things are, in that moment, and I'm talking like 3 or 4 seconds, you see heads drop in the audience, phones out, right? We've already decided as an audience, yeah, I don't think it's going to be any good. Yeah, probably not going to be any good. And they check out, right? And then we look for evidence to back up our initial impression. Now, here's the thing. Let's say partway through, you make a mistake, right? So there's a little error. There's something very obviously wrong on the slides, or you get something in the wrong way. You make a mistake and it's clear. If you've stumbled and tripped at the beginning and it hasn't been great, I think most audiences instinctively will think, yeah, I thought so. Didn't think this was going to be any good, and there's the evidence. Yeah, no good. Sorry. And they might listen and they might like what you're talking about, but they've made that impression. If, however, you've made a great first impression and they like you and they think, yeah, this is good, and you make a little trip and you handle it and you say, okay, that's broken, didn't mean to show you that, here's something else instead, and you move on quickly, that might even be better than having no mistake, because then you've got something relevant. They think, oh, that's great, but everyone makes mistakes. So it's exactly the same mistake, very different reaction, right? So I would not necessarily go large at the beginning, but really get that beginning bit, get that just right. And the ways you can do that are, first of all, even though I've said don't have a verbatim script, you might want to rehearse your very first line, just so that you can sort of hit the ground running, take off. I don't know, there's some metaphor there, but just get that out. So this is me, this is my project, and I'm going to talk to you about this. You could rehearse that very first bit and then have some fun with the rest of it. But the second thing you need to do is to check the venue and the physicality. And it might seem like really simple stuff, but this will make the difference. Get into the room where you're going to be speaking and investigate everything. So I've got a lectern here with a microphone. I've got my mug of tea and a mouse and notes and stuff, right? And I've also got lights, and I've got my camera. And you'll notice, actually, if you are doing stuff online, I have the camera lined up with my vision of my own face, image of my own face on the screen, so I can kind of look at you. So if you don't look at me, it's not too different. It's just a little thing. A lot of people will do pictures like this because they've got 2 monitors and they don't realize. So get familiar with everything. Get into that room, wherever it is, if you can, the day before, a week before, whenever, and just get used to it. So the room where I've come to in Tileyard has some tricky steps, right? They are of an inconsistent height. There's only like 3 of them, but whenever I see those, my spider sense tingles, and I think, right, there's a potential here for a possibly dramatic incident and litigation. I can't do that. But anyway, the point is, I need to get familiar with that room. So get familiar with everything about it. It just means, and it's worth doing half an hour in there and rehearsing in there, even better. It just means when you start, you're not thinking of any of those things. You're just thinking, I'm going to talk to this audience about this thing. Hi, this is me, and I'm going to talk about this. Maybe you bring up a slide, click, and it works. So I would really work on that. Rehearse as much as you can. See if you can get feedback. If you can rehearse in front of a trusted colleague, do that. If it's a 10-minute thing, and you could do it for each other, right? Say, right, I've got something. I think it's okay. I think it's in a form that works, and you've got something great. Let's get coffee. Go into the room, run through it, just give me brutally honest feedback, right? And there could be some really simple wins, which are just you stood in a funny way, or you spoke too quickly, or any number of little things, like quick little fixes that will make a real difference. If you can, video yourself and watch it back. I know it's deeply uncomfortable to hear your own voice, let alone see yourself in video. But honestly, stay with me. Get someone to record you on your phone, do the thing, watch it back, take notes, just fix those things. Honestly, it makes a huge difference. You might speak too fast, not smile. There might be lots of ums and ers. There might be a filler word. It just helps you fix those little things. Okay. But get some feedback as well, and give proper feedback. Don't just say, hey, that was great. Even if it was great, say it was great, you did this. But be open with each other and say, look, this thing, you should fix that, right? You did this, or even it might be this didn't make sense. I didn't understand what you meant. Sort that out. But rehearsal is definitely your friend. It's the thing that people will put off, and I know there'll be some of you who just won't do it, but it really makes a difference. Okay, in terms of where to. I mean, I like to, if there's a lectern, I like to get up from behind it. I just like to do things differently to everyone else. I recommend walking around and moving. I recommend doing a bit of performance. It depends on the format, it depends on the shape of the room. But I think as soon as you move around, it just helps. You know, you've probably got a lot of adrenaline pumping through you, so that can be really useful. Yeah, just doing something different. It's just more engaging, I think, when people have seen a series of people all standing in exactly the same place. If you're then moving around, then I think that can work really well. Okay, here's the thing. Humor. So with my vast experience of trying to make people laugh for money, being funny in a pitch or presentation, it can be the magic bit, right? It can be the thing that really stands out. And I have seen people do funny bits. They've got a funny line, there's a funny line on the slide, or they've got a thing and it's something maybe they've tried and tested, and that can work. But here's what I think. I think there's a possibly more effective and easy way of doing it, which is to simply talk about things as they happen. So I mentioned the cup of tea or rubbing my nose. I know it's not incredibly amusing, but by creating that tone where you're just casually talking about things as they happen, that can be really funny. So if something goes wrong, like I said, the error on the slide or something, and you, instead of apologizing profusely, which can maybe confirm the idea that there was something wrong, and people think, oh, okay, maybe there was a problem there. If you sort of brush over it and smile and say, right, that's broken, let's do this thing instead, that can be really nice. That can be funny. As I said, I might talk about the shape of the room, or where someone's sitting, or their clothes in a nice way, or just something of the moment. So at Tileyard, I think in the afternoon session, or whenever it was, someone had some food. And I said, oh, and I just start talking about their food, right? So the food in itself isn't particularly funny. Me talking about a hard-boiled egg or a salad or whatever, for some reason, is funny. So I would give yourself permission to be informal and to have fun with what's going on. It might not generate a laugh, but it will create that atmosphere and tone where laughs can happen. And when something goes wrong, it creates a tension. By just talking about it and saying, okay, let's move on, or let's do this next thing, you can get a laugh. Okay, so that's how I feel about humor and make people laugh. But here's the thing linked to that: apologizing. If you apologize a lot for something that's gone wrong, as I said, it might kind of cement the idea that there was something wrong, and whereas going the other way might seem a little arrogant, but I would say a very small apology and then just act as if nothing's happened could be rather good. I mean, let's say, as an extreme example, let's say you're late to give your pitch, right? So you're 3 or 4 minutes late. The audience, whoever they are a bit annoyed. Your first step could be to explain in wonderful detail about how it's definitely not your fault, and to apologize profusely. Apologizing is good, but they don't need to know why you were late, even if it's not your fault. I think the best way to minimize that damage, because it is damage and they're going to be annoyed whatever happens, but the best way is, oh my God, I'm really sorry. Thank you so much for waiting. I really appreciate it. Let's get straight into it. And here it is, and start off that way. And in that scenario, I wouldn't mess around with the slides. I'll just go, here's my thing. Like, I can send you slides later, but here's what I want to talk to you about. Like, give them that, value for money straight away. By not apologizing too much, which I'm going to go on a limb and say is more of a male thing than a female thing. This is one way. I haven't got feedback. I have no idea what you think. But it could be seen as a little arrogant, but I think you can get away with it if you're smiling and just minimize. I'm just saying, don't diminish your credibility by apologizing too much, and make of that what you will. Right. So let's talk about mindset. Right. You've got everything ready. You've rehearsed. By this stage, you should be feeling pretty good about it. Okay. Or a lot better than you were. Now, again, fear is part of the process. It's normal. you can't predict what's going to happen. You want to get a good result. Good. You're a human being. That's fine. What's kicking off there is fight, flight, or freeze, which you might be familiar with. It's an instinctive reaction. It's to save you from physical danger. It's not really useful here, but it still kicks off anyway. And so part of your brain thinks this isn't just an investor or someone I'm pitching to. It's a saber-toothed tiger, right? It literally doesn't know the difference. It thinks I might die. So this isn't useful. And so you will experience some weird physical things. So I never get sweaty palms, but lots of people tell me they get that. What I do find is my heart rate will increase significantly. I'll get hot, I might be sweating. And generally the heart racing is the main thing. And it's weird. And feeling nervous is scary, right? So it perpetuates. Great. Other physical processes that happen, one of them vitally is because your body's preparing you to fight or run, it shuts down non-essential functions. See if you can guess what some of those functions are. One of them is saliva production. Well, thank you very much. Also, your digestive system, which is why you get butterflies, you need to go to the toilet, and everyone experiences this, and it's a horrible thing. So, recognizing it, right, I feel weird, I'm shaking. I once had one where I was giving a big talk for Sony in Berlin, or a bunch of talks, it was a talk every day, and before one of the talks, my teeth were chattering. Brilliant. I'm just, whole body's shaking, thank God it stopped. So recognizing it, realizing what it is. Okay, my body is kicking off. How do you counter that? How do you stop yourself feeling so incredibly nervous? I've reached a point where through a lot of speaking experience, I'm in control of it. Okay, so I still feel the nerves, or I get that physical experience, but I recognize it and I know that generally it's going to be okay. Okay. A good way to reframe it for yourself, and this is how you counter it. So you've got this instinctive reaction. You need to program yourself with the good stuff, with the facts, right? But a really good way to reframe it is, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. And I guess a doctor or a psychologist, whatever, would argue that that's just framing. It's exactly the same thing. Your body's going through the same thing, right? It's getting wired. You've got adrenaline pumping through you. Tell yourself it's excitement, right? I'm excited about this. You can program yourself with what I like to call the positive truths, right? The positive truths are all the facts, all the things that a friend or colleague would remind you of. And you can probably work them out on your own. I'll tell you anyway. The audience is on your side, right? They want you to do well. They are not out to get you. Yeah, if it's an investor, they might pick holes because they just want to get to the bottom of it, but ultimately they want you to succeed. That's the first one. Although actually above that is, you are physically safe. You will not die. Worth stating, because part of your brain is thinking, I might die. Remind yourself, I'm physically safe. They want me to do well. It will be over soon. It's not a bad thing. In 15 minutes or whenever, I'll be having a cup of tea and sitting down and eating something nice, right? Nothing wrong with reminding yourself of that. I'm going to talk about the subject that I know about. I'm going to talk about something that I know inside out and I love it. And sometimes a good way of framing it for yourself is, I'm excited. I'm going to share this thing with them. And it's a thing that stand-up comics do. Right, I've got something to share with you. I've got this thing I want to tell you about. And that's it. There is a risk, but it's very minimal. And here's another thing that's probably worth mentioning. They don't care that much, right? Now, all I mean is, your speaking situation, you're giving this pitch, probably feels more significant to you than it does to them, right? Doesn't mean it's not important, doesn't mean that this isn't a great opportunity for you to succeed and maybe to get investment and for your project to progress. But someone in that audience at some point is going to think, oh, I wonder what's for lunch, right? We're all heroes in our own story and bit parts in somebody else's, right? At the end of the day, I mean, literally at the end of the day, it's not as important as you think. Okay, so I don't mean to belittle what you're doing. What you're doing is wonderful, but it's not that big a deal, right? They don't care that much in a nice way, okay? Put it into perspective. I recommend physical activities to help you relax. Amy Cuddy's TED talk, Your Body Language May Shape Who You Are, talks about how if you stand a particular way, before when I mentioned the smiling, by the way, so this is part of this, smiling and eye contact sends a signal to the audience that says, I'm happy, therefore I probably know what I'm doing. It also sends a signal to your own subconscious, let's say to your brain. But it's the part of the brain that's not, consciously thinking, that says, I'm comfortable doing this, I'm happy doing it, which is crazy. Even if you're really nervous, by smiling, you start convincing your subconscious that you're happy doing something, which is wonderful. And physical stance can definitely do that as well. I recommend gesturing. A lot of people tell me how they've been told, oh, don't wave your hands around, it's distracting. No, do it, especially if you're online. Gesture, no one knows what to do with their hands, right? Hands at your side look stupid after a few seconds. I've seen people present with a pen for no reason, but it just looked great. It looked natural. Wingardium Leviosa. With index cards, I wouldn't go with a sheet of paper, even though I've talked about having cues on a sheet of paper, because you can see it moving around if you're nervous, right? And you'll be nervous. But holding something can be really good. A clicker for your slides is great. So, yeah, gesturing is good. But the physical stance, if you assume the physical stance of the confident speaker and you step into that role, it does wonders for your subconscious and how you feel about the whole thing. Ultimately, I would say the biggest opponent in the room when you're pitching to someone is you telling yourself some dreadfully unhelpful story about how you're not good at this and they don't like you. You don't need that. Positive self-programming. I'm in a safe place. I'm going to talk about this thing. That's it. That's what you need to tell yourself. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up now. Well done for sticking with this, if you have. One last thing. Yeah, a couple of little things on the psychology of it, and then I will sum up for you. So self-acceptance is also really key, and that's part of that story. I've struggled with that, and I think, I'm inadequate or bad or whatever. Tell yourself the good stuff. Tell yourself what you need to hear. Tell yourself the good, positive truths. Accept all your weaknesses. You might want to declare a weakness at the beginning and say, by the way, here's something. Just get it out there. Suddenly you've removed all the power that it has over you. You've probably made yourself more relatable. I mean, it depends what it is, obviously. But also own your strengths. When someone tells you you're really good at this thing, own it. And you don't have to declare to anyone that I'm really good at this thing, but you can say, I really enjoy doing whatever it is. Own your flaws, own your strengths. I think that's a great way to move forward. Oh, something I didn't mention, actually, which I should have mentioned before, is how to conclude. So this is me concluding and showing you how to conclude. It's all very meta. Generally, I do sometimes see people finishing with questions, and generally I don't like that. I think it's a weak ending. Having questions is great, right? Q&A at the end, wonderful. And you can ask me questions when we meet on this stuff. But the way I would do it is sum up everything, call to action, thank you. That's it. If any questions come, then they'll come naturally afterwards, and that's fine. But if you finish with this great thing and then say, so any questions, or now I'll take questions, you kind of throw it to the audience, and that's... they might not have any questions. It doesn't mean that your talk wasn't any good, but they literally might not have any questions, and then there's an awkward silence. Whereas if you just finish with a nice, neat thank you, then questions might come, and if there's only one, then it doesn't matter. So, to sum up then, say the words out loud, note down key points, create that first draft as rough and ready as you like, but keep it nice and fluid, incorporate a story, get that all in there before you move on to visuals. Get the structure so it feels right. Keep saying it, keep using speaking to inform the writing process. Then look at visuals if you need them and where you can judiciously incorporate them so they solve problems and they're only present to solve problems. Work on that performance, rehearse, get used to saying the words, say it out loud, get comfortable with that until it's really part of a sort of muscle memory so you can just deliver those key points for different durations whenever you need to. And finally, give yourself permission to just be authentic, to be you, to talk about your subject, to speak your truth without fear of judgment. And if you want to learn more about this, you can find my website, but you're going to see me in person anyway. And TED Talks are a wonderful resource for looking at lots of different subjects and looking at the different ways that people do things. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to meeting you in person.